Hi, how are you doing today? I hope things are going well. They're going well for me, and I am excited about looking at the Word of God once again. And we're going to be in Genesis as we're moving through this book. It is the most important story in the Bible in the sense that it's the foundation for everything else. And if you don't have a good foundation for understanding the Bible, then you're going to come up with some pretty crazy ideas, and the world is full of them. A lot of even Christianity has some of them. So that's why I'm interested in looking at the scripture, looking at the Bible, starting with Genesis. So the first thing I want to talk today is about kinds, that animals have kinds. Some people will dismiss Genesis because they say it's scientifically inaccurate. Evolution, and they say evolution proves that Genesis is wrong. But science cannot prove Genesis wrong because Genesis is not a discourse on science. And we're going to look at that a little bit closer. But Genesis was written to Israelites about 3,500 years ago. They had been in the land of Egypt for 400 years in a polytheistic culture. And God told Moses to lead them out of Egypt to the promised land. Moses did that. He wrote the Pentateuch, the five first books of the Bible. And the very first book was Genesis because he needed to lay down the foundation of who these people were and some very important things. Now, one of the curious things that I've been thinking about lately is a lot of people will say, I don't need that old book, or I don't need to listen to all that stuff from people way long ago that are ignorant. Now, if you think about that, that is a very, very arrogant attitude to have about the Bible, because what you're saying is people back then didn't need to know why they were alive, why the earth existed, or anything about, the world. Only we do today, and we're smart enough to know because we understand science and we have theories of the Big Bang and all that. So we're smart enough to know, but they didn't need to know back then. Well, I say they did. I say all of humanity needed to understand things. And so I would put a lot of weight upon tales that are old, stories that are old, that teach us about our past because we learn from them. So, like I said, it was written by Israelites, and I believe Genesis is not a chronology in the sense that a lot of people put a lot of weight on a timeline of it happened in a certain amount of time. And I don't think that's what Genesis is getting at. It's not that kind of a story. It's more of a story of telling us why we exist. It's telling us the why of things, not the why in the sense of how something happened, but why something happened. And that's always important for us. We want to know why. We want to know why we were born, not how we were born, not how our bodies were formed in the womb, but why. Why did our parents want kids? Why did they want me? Why do they love me? Or do they love me? See, these are the big questions of life, and this is what Genesis is about to do, is to tell us all these wonderful things about God and why we're here. So I want to ask a series of questions to prove to you that science cannot deny what Genesis chapter 1 is talking about in the creation story. We first ask the question, is there a universe and a planet Earth? Do we have an atmosphere that has clouds? Are there rivers, lakes, and oceans? Is there dry land and plants? Is there a sun, moon, and stars? And do we use them to understand time? Are there birds that fly in the sky and creatures that live in the waters? Are there animals that live on the land? Are humans unique from all other creatures? Are there 7 days in a week? Now, I think it's obvious that all these are true. Just go outside and observe things. This is true, right? So we got to understand. So science can't prove any of that is wrong. And that's what Genesis is listing, all these things. And it says that God was the one who created them. we also find mention that God created animals after their kind. Let's read a couple verses from Genesis chapter 1, and we're going to look at verse 21. And God created great whales and every living creature that moveth, which the waters have brought forth abundantly after their kind, and every winged fowl after his kind. And God saw that it was good. Now, Genesis 1:24 and 25. And God said, let the earth bring forth living creatures after his kind, cattle and creeping thing and beast of the earth after his kind. And it was so. And God made the beast of the earth after his kind, and the cattle after their kind, and every good thing that creepeth upon the earth after his kind, and saw that it was good. Now, what's a kind? I once heard atheistic scientists say, I don't even know what a kind means. And the reason he was so confused is because he believed everything evolved from a single source of life. Well, I think a 2-year-old, well, maybe that's exaggerated, but I think a 5-year-old understands what a kind is. A kind is that the things that can reproduce. You have to have two of the same things that reproduce. I thought about an illustration, and I mean, this would be quite silly, but it proves how silly it is not to understand a kind. Imagine a man wants to raise a herd of goats, so he buys a goat, but then he thinks, well, rabbits have a lot of babies, so if I breed my goat with a rabbit, I'm going to have way more babies. Now, anybody would say, well, that's dumb. You can't breed goats and rabbits. It doesn't work that way. The reason for that is there are kinds, and anybody who doesn't understand what a kind is simply ignorant. I'm sorry, but they are. So if you're so caught up in evolution that you can't figure out what a kind is, then I'm saying you're lost, like a person in the forest who can't see the forest through the trees. And I'm not eager to talk about evolution because it's a hot debate, and I don't want to bring Genesis down to an evolutionary talk, but I kind of have to deal with it a little bit because we're talking about kinds here. And when I talk about evolution, or when we talk about evolution, we're not talking about adaptation. Adaptation is for the ability for living things to adapt. And that means that every living thing can adapt to its environment. Things upon its effects upon it allows it to adapt. But that takes a very advanced life form in order for something to adapt. So we're not talking about adaptation when we're talking about evolution here. What we're talking about is things being created from nothing. Sorry about all the commotion in the background. I'm not a mathematician, but I know 3 times 3 is 9. I'm not a biologist, but I know that life does not spontaneously exist. Evolution does not describe how things came to be. Evolution describes, or it attempts to describe, how things evolve, how life evolves. You first have to have life for things to evolve. And in order to have life, you have to have what's called DNA. DNA is an instruction inside the cell that tells it what it's supposed to be. Your skin cells are different than your muscle cells, and your muscle cells are different than your lung cells. And so all these things know what they're supposed to be because there's a code called DNA and that instruction. Well, where did this DNA come from? Now, others will say, well, evolution's true because we can see that things have similar DNA. Now, again, I'm not a biologist, but I have some common sense. And, if you were to go online and buy blueprints for a house, you could buy a lot of different blueprints for different style of homes. But within those blueprints, you're going to find that all these things have bathrooms, have rooms, electrical, plumbing, they have a roof and a floor, they have walls, they have many similarities. But if you were to look at these houses, they will look different. And so, because things are built off of similarities, only means that they are they have the same functions. And a lot of creatures have the same functions. People will say chimpanzees have, I think, like 80% common DNA with humans. Well, they have a lot of common features, but it doesn't mean we evolved from some standard or from some similar past living life form. So, like I said, nobody has ever seen life spontaneously exist. And so we want to say that it was God that created life. And people will say, well, that's the God of the gaps. What they mean by that is they're saying you're just trying to fill in a knowledge gap with God. Well, so be it. We don't understand what gravity is. We just know that there's a force out there called gravity, but we don't know what it is, so we call gravity. So you could say, well, using the word gravity is just a word of the gaps. And I mean, yeah, because we don't know what it is, so we give it a name. And so we don't know how life came to be, and we could just say that there was a creator, God, that created it. Except that, see, gravity is a non-moral agent, and we can be all right with that. It doesn't rule our life, or we don't have any responsibility towards it. But God, now if there's a God, that's a moral being, and we would probably have to deal with that moral being, and we just don't like that, so God's off the table. And I think if God's off the table, then you have no open mind. Now I know in science we can't use God as a reason, because science is reproducing and observing things, and we cannot reproduce God, and we cannot reproduce life. And so of course it's not a part of science, and I don't say that believing in God should be part of science, but science should not exclude the idea that there can be a creator. So evolution is the advancement of life without any intelligent guidance. And I mean, just saying that just sounds ridiculous. What? You mean this advanced life form, even us humans with all our complexity, happened without any guidance whatsoever? Well, yes, that's what evolution has done. And of course, the explanation by scientists is that evolution is guided by natural selection. But natural selection is a mindless process, and it cannot predict the future. It cannot predict what is needed next in order for something to succeed. What natural selection does is says, no good, gone, it's dead. Vanish, destroy it, is what natural selection does. So imagine you're given a task to build something, but you have no idea what the end process is. You have no idea what it's supposed to do, its function. You're just told, build something, but you don't know what the function is. But there is a needed function. So if you were to start this process and the thing that you did first was not advantageous towards that function, the person who instructed you to do it would destroy your work and say, well, you made a mistake, you're done. Well, that's what natural selection does. It says, oops, that's not good, that's not right, and life is dead. So natural selection would have to have millions of opportunities in order for it to finally be able to allow the right one to survive. And how many original life forms do you think there was? If we have just life that just spontaneously came into existence, how many of those life forms could have spontaneously existed? And in how big of an area could it existed? And so it would be unlikely that any one of those life forms could have survived, not knowing what their next step in life would have been. Now, sorry, my notes just went up and I had to get back to where I was. So I think of simple things, even as plants. How do plants know how to face the sun? How do they know to turn? They have no brain or whatever, but yet they do that. And we can't even reproduce something as simple as that. So conclusion, God made kinds. God made animals in kinds. Kinds are things that can reproduce. And anybody who has ever dealt with animals knows what a kind is. And even if evolution was true, it has brought us to the place that there are kinds. And so the Bible's true that God made things in kinds. And how open is your mind to God? That's the question you really need to answer for yourself. Are you open to the possibility of being a God? There being a God. And if not, why? Be honest with yourself. Why couldn't there be a God? Now, you say, well, I don't like the God of the Bible. That's fine. That's not the question. The question is not whether you believe in the God of the Bible. The question is, do you believe in a God who created everything? So what say you about all this? Do you believe that there are kinds, that animals are of kinds? Is that what you believe? And how do you believe these ever came to be? Well, Genesis tells us that God did it. And like I said, that's what Genesis 1 is all about, teaching us that it is God who is behind everything. Thanks again so much for listening to this. I appreciate you doing that. And I hope that if you would subscribe, and if you have any friends or people that you might think would get a blessing out of this, I hope that you would share it to them. Thank you so much. I appreciate it. Have a great day. Bye.